History of Brazil. The following discussion focuses on Brazilian history from the time of European settlement. For a treatment of the country in its regional context, see Latin America, History of. Archaeological sites near the Amazonian towns of Santarém and Monte Alegre and elsewhere in Brazil show that the region has been inhabited since at least 9000 BCE. Mixed communities of farmers, fishers, and hunters and gatherers developed in the Amazon lowlands, whereas hunters and gatherers predominated in the drier savannas and highlands. Between 2 million and 6 million indigenous Indians lived in the region at the time of European contact in 1500. Tupian-speaking Indians inhabited the coastal areas and were among the more significant of the tropical forest groups. Portuguese explorers of the region first encountered Tupians and principally dealt with them for many years. Indeed, Tupians may have been the most important Indian influence in Brazil's early colonial period and in the culture that subsequently developed. However, European diseases decimated the indigenous population, and many surviving Indians endured harsh treatment under Portuguese domination. Early period. Exploration and initial settlement. Europeans explored the Brazilian coastline only after mapping parts of the Caribbean Sea and the northeastern coast of South America. Moreover, intensive exploration of Brazil resulted indirectly from Portugal's efforts to expand its colonies in Africa and Asia. In 1498, the Portuguese navigator Vasco da Gama discovered an all-water route to the Indies and the Spice Islands, via Africa's Cape of Good Hope. The Portuguese king, hoping to capitalize on this discovery, dispatched an imposing armada to India under Pedro Álvares Cabral, whose sailing directions had been drawn up by da Gama himself. To avoid the calms off the Gulf of Guinea, Cabral bore so far to the west that on April 22, 1500, he sighted the mainland of South America. The Treaty of Tordesillas, 1494, between Spain and Portugal had established a line at about longitude 46 degrees 30 minutes west that divided Spanish, west, and Portuguese, east, claims in the New World. The region cited by Cabral lay well within the Portuguese zone, and the crown promptly claimed it. Portugal's new possession was initially called Vera Cruz, True Cross, but it was soon renamed Brazil because of the copious amounts of Brazil wood, pau-brasil, found there that yielded a valuable red dye. The tidings of Cabral's landing aroused great enthusiasm among the Portuguese, and the crown began to sponsor major transatlantic explorations, including that of the Italian navigator Amerigo Vespucci, whose small fleet sailed along the coast of Brazil and for the first time estimated the extent of the land. Vespucci, calendar in hand, baptized different points on the coast with the names of the saints on whose days they were discovered. Interest in Brazil waned over the subsequent 2 decades. The Portuguese began a desultory trade with the Indians for Brazil wood, but they failed to discover precious metals in Brazil and thus focused their attention on the lucrative trade with Asia. Brazil became a sort of no-man's land over which the Portuguese crown wielded only a shadowy control, and European rivals quickly took advantage of that neglect. The French, in particular, trespassed on Portuguese claims in South America and shipped the dyewood to Europe. Portugal's apathy ended, however, during the reign 1521–57 of John III, who gradually shifted the focus in colonial affairs from Asia to America. The Portuguese crown made the first systematic effort to establish a government in Brazil in 1533. It divided the colony into 15 hereditary captaincies, or fiefs, each extending 50 leagues, i.e., about 160 miles, 260 kilometers, along the coast and an indefinite distance inland. These grants were distributed to favored persons, chiefly courtiers, who became known as donatarios, donis, and wielded extensive rights and privileges. However, only 2 of the captaincies were ultimately successful: São Vicente, in present São Paulo state, and Pernambuco. The former included the town of São Vicente, the growing port of Santos, and the village of São Paulo on the Serra do Mar's fertile Piratininga Plateau, all of which had a combined population of about 5,000 by the mid-16th century. The captaincy of Pernambuco developed in northeastern Brazil, centered on the town of Olinda. Its Donatario, Duarte Coelho Pereira, converted Pernambuco into a great sugar-producing region, offering the first example of a profitable agrarian export from the New World to Europe. Royal governors, Jesuits, and slaves. King John III resolved to strengthen his authority in Brazil by unifying the inefficient Donatarios under a central administration. He appointed as Governor-General Tomé de Sousa, a Portuguese noble with impressive experience in Africa and India. Sousa landed in Brazil in 1549 and founded Salvador, Bahia, a capital from which Brazil was governed for 214 years. Sousa also placed local officials over the captaincies and fortified strategic points along the coast. In the cities, he established municipal organizations similar to those in Portugal. Brazil then began to attract settlers in increasing numbers. By 1600, Bahia and Pernambuco each had a population of roughly 2,000 Europeans, and more than twice as many African slaves and Indians.